Welcome to Breaking Par with Bernard Sheridan, the golf podcast that interviews the best and brightest minds in the golf industry. Now, here's your host, Bernard Sheridan.
Sam, welcome to Breaking Par. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for inviting me. Looking forward to it.
So, first time you ever picked up a golf club, how old were you?
I was 9 years old, and I fell in love with golf. At that point in time, I played primarily baseball and football, but I just loved sports. But golf had a particular fascination for me because it wasn't a team sport. It was just something that was me. Whether I was good at it was up to me. Win, lose, or draw, it was up to me. And I didn't need anybody else to practice with. And being an only child, that's kind of an important thing, I guess. But I could spend all day on the golf course, if necessary, by myself, and which I did on some occasions. But I fell in love with it. And I had a cousin. We all started about the same time, and I had a cousin who was about a year and a half older than I was, and he and I took it up at the same time. And he was a natural athlete. He was one of those people that could step on a banana peel and make it look graceful. And he and I were very competitive with each other, and we spent all day in the summertime, especially all day, every day at the golf course. And we pushed each other, and we just kept getting better. And we both ended up going to the University of South Carolina on golf scholarships. And of course, he had a football and a basketball scholarship offered also. But and I ended up with a younger cousin who ended up going to Furman University on a golf scholarship. So the whole family just jumped into it. And although I'm the only one that stayed with it and eventually turned professional. And I like every young guy who's a pretty good player, I had my visions of playing the tour, but unfortunately, I realized at a fairly young age that, and back then, there wasn't a lot of money in playing the tour. Mm. $100,000 was a good year, and it cost a lot of money just to be out there.
Sure.
So I realized at a fairly early age that the best I was ever going to be was a marginal tour player, and at best. So I decided that the path I really wanted to go was teaching the game. And so I changed my focus to learning as much as I could about the golf game and the golf swing. And the one thing that really surprised me was I made the assumption, I think like a lot of people do, that because I could play the game at a pretty high level, and I did manage to play in a couple of tour events, but the fact that I could play the game at a high level, I just assumed that I could teach it. And I realized fairly early that I was struggling with being a successful teacher. My students just weren't picking it up as quickly as I thought they should or could. So I realized that my ability to play the game did not translate in an ability to teach the game. I had to learn to teach. And so I set out doing that. And I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to spend time around some really great teachers. And I found out that there are a number of, there always have been and always will be a number of really great teachers that nobody really knows. I mean, they're not nationally known.
Sure.
But they nonetheless are great teachers. But one of the guys that I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to meet Harvey Penick. And I look back on it now and I wish I had that opportunity today, because what I would have asked him today would be a lot different than what I asked him when I was in my 20s.
Sure, of course. So, because when you were in your 20s, sometimes, you don't have that knowledge behind you. You don't always know what kind of questions to ask. But once you have knowledge, there's so much more questions that you want to ask and that you know more about and want to get the opinion of a better, or I don't want to say a better instructor, but a mentor, to you, who you look up to. I feel the same way about it. For me, is that as I get older, I feel like there's less that I know and more that I want to know.
Well, that you're exactly right. I mean, that's what happens when you're, at least in my case, when I was young, I thought I knew.
Well, we all do.
And the surprising thing to me was the more I learned, the more I realized what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I mean, my beliefs about teaching then in the golf swing and my beliefs today are not even in the same ballpark.
Right.
But that's the advantage of teaching golf over a long period of time and having just a curiosity. I mean, curiosity drives me. I'm the kid in school that when the teacher would say 2 and 2 is 4, I would say, why?
Yeah, me too.
I was either the teacher's favorite or they hoped I wouldn't have perfect attendance. But, that my curiosity just kept driving me to ask people that I considered successful. And I fortunately had the opportunity to do that. I would seek them out, and the great thing was nobody ever said no. They never turned me down, and they never charged me anything. They just shared their knowledge with me, and I appreciated that tremendously.
I find that there's a lot of great instructors who are willing to do that, and I think that is because I've done that with a lot of instructors, and I've gone to them, and they were more than happy. Sure, come on over whenever you want, and they're which is really, really a great thing, because that knowledge needs to be passed on, and I know that there are some professionals who don't want to share their knowledge, or at least it used to be that way, because they're afraid that you're going to take something away from them, or you're going to use what they have, and then you might do it better than them, or I don't really know what their idea is there, but I think that the ones who are secure in their own self
Exactly.
are willing to help you in any way, because they know that there are so many golfers out there. There are plenty of pieces of pie to go around for everybody, and the more that we can help each other, the more we're going to elevate the game, and that's really what we want to do. I think, and at least I do.
That's the whole idea is to be able to help more golfers. Now, you know as well as I do that today, not everybody teachers are like doctors or lawyers or anything else. Not everybody that does it is good.
Right.
It's the old joke about, what do you call the guy who finished last in his class in medical school? You call him doctor.
Yeah.
But we're not all good at it. But I think everybody likes. I know I have no problem sharing what I've learned. Just if it will help somebody be a little bit better at what they do and help a few more people, then it's worthwhile. And about 3 years ago, for some reason, I started to become curious. I had accumulated a great deal of knowledge about the golf swing, but I started realizing that, well, I've got all of this knowledge, but maybe there's a better way to teach. So I started doing a lot of research on how people, humans, actually learn complex motor skills.
Yeah.
And everybody else is primarily running around. They're getting certified in biomechanics and all that, and that's wonderful. But I still go back to my original premise that it doesn't matter how many certifications you have, if you don't know how to deliver that information, then it's pointless.
I agree.
And so that's kind of where I've been for the last few years, is just trying to get a better understanding of how people learn. And one of the things I've started to realize is that people learn visually. They learn by watching and doing. That's just, we're hardwired that way.
Yep.
That's how we learn. We watch, we do, and it's a trial and error type thing. And which led me to realize that people learn a lot more by watching and doing than they do by listening. So this kind of changed my emphasis on teaching, that standing there talking to somebody for 30 minutes is potentially a waste of time. You've got to figure out how to engage them in the conversation, get them involved, get them to the point to where they're comfortable, that they feel like that you really care about them and care about helping them, and comfortable enough to where they can ask questions. They feel comfortable asking questions.
Sure, people skills. People skills
Yeah,
are very important in instruction and in teaching.
the one thing that I learned about all of the great teachers is they all were just innately good communicators.
Yes.
They had good people skills. They didn't study it, but they just instinctively did it.
Yep.
And I think that's one thing that's missing. Maybe not missing because it's not lost. It just needs to be. There needs to be more emphasis put on teaching people, teaching instructors, people skills, communication skills. You can learn, maybe not to be a great communicator, but you can learn to be better. And that if you're a better communicator, you're going to be a better teacher.
I agree. I think that, to go back full circle to when we started this conversation, and you said that, you were a good player and you thought that because you were a good player, you would be a good teacher. And then you found out that you were having difficulty communicating that information. And there's a lot of good players who can do things incredible with their game and are extremely highly talented. But when you ask them how to do it, they'll just say, well, you just do this. And because to them it comes a lot more simplistically, and it's more innate in them. And then other players, they don't have that I want to say that innate sporting athletic ability to get their body to do those things. So it's going to take a lot of communicating to those people to get them to understand it and to be able to actually implement it. That's where the communication skills definitely come in.
Well, one of the things that I learned is from being, when I made that transition from playing to teaching, was what I was trying to get across to the student is, well, it should feel like this.
Right.
Because that's what it felt like to me.
Yes.
So I assumed that's what it would feel like to him. And that was a really, really, really bad assumption. Because if you and I do exactly the same thing, it's going to feel to me like I did this, and it's going to feel to you like you did this.
Yep.
So that's one thing that I had to learn is you can't teach somebody by telling him what it feels like to you or what it's going to feel like to them, because you have no idea.
Right.
And, so this is a standard operating procedure for me in a lesson is, when somebody when they do something successful, they hit a good shot, we stop right there. And I want to know what that felt like. I want them to think about what that felt like. And then we'll discuss it maybe. Like, okay, that's what it felt like to you. Now, what your job is to reproduce that feeling as often as you can. And this is one thing that people don't, I don't think they do this instinctively in golf. Memory is triggered to a great extent by emotions. And unfortunately, anger is stronger than pleasure. So people remember their bad shots in more detail than they do their good shots. So this is why you need to really emphasize when you're playing golf and you hit a good shot, you need to just stop for a second and just remember what that felt like. And because when you hit a bad shot, you're going to remember what that felt like.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can't go to the next shot trying to make sure you don't do that again. You can't swing at a golf ball from a negative point of view of don't hit it right, don't hit it fat. You may not hit it right or you may not hit it fat, but you will not hit it good.
Right. No, I've always found too that, and I try to explain to students that whenever you think about something that you don't want to have happen, it usually happens. And that's because you're focusing on that subject. Your brain doesn't realize don't or do. It just realizes that subject. It's like that old saying, don't think of the pink elephant, right? Immediately, everybody that's listening right now, pink elephant pops into their mind.
Right.
So like I always say to my students, especially when they're out on the course or whatever, I don't even worry about what the trouble is. I say to them, where do you want the ball to go? What do you want to have happen here? Let's look at what we want to have happen. Let's not worry about what we don't want to have happen. Because if we worry about that, it's going to happen.
That's a perfect example of that was I had a lady that came to me, and anyway, in the conversation of getting to know her and getting to know what her objectives were and what she wanted to get out of it and this sort of thing, we had this par 3. It was the 5th hole on this particular golf course that had a pond, and you didn't have to. You were hitting off an elevated tee to an elevated green, and the pond was down here.
Sure.
So it wasn't a particularly long carry, but she just said, she wanted to be able to hit it over the pond on number 5 on a regular basis. And I said, okay, that's not a problem. So I just put her in the golf cart and we went out to number 5 with a few balls. And we get up on the tee and, she tees it up and takes a couple of practice swings and she addresses the ball, steps up to it. She's getting ready to hit it. And I said, all right, now go ahead and just relax and hit the ball just like you normally do. And she did. And she hit it in the water. And I said, all right, I want you to think back for a second. Before you started to swing the golf club, what was the last thing you remember thinking? She said, ripples in the water. She had, before she started the club back, the last thing she saw in her mind was the ball going in the water. And so I said, all right, I want you to do me a favor. And I said, wait right here. And I hopped in the golf cart and drove over just short of the green, about halfway up the hill. And I just laid a head cover down and went back to the tee. And I said, all right, what I want you to do is simply focus on that head cover. I said, don't try to hit the green. I just want you to hit the ball of the head cover. She never had another problem getting it over the water. I didn't do anything physically to her golf swing. I just got her to change her target.
Yep.
And, that is a powerful thing, concentrating on where you want the ball to go, not where you don't want it to go.
Sam, what I think is so unusual about this game and opposed to other sports is when a player plays other sports, baseball, football, hockey, soccer, tennis, they're not thinking about where they don't want to throw the ball or hit the ball. They're always thinking about where they, like, if I'm a shortstop and I get a grounder, I'm not thinking about where I don't want to throw it.
Throwing the ball.
I don't even think about the act.
No.
I just react. And if it's a double play, I throw it to second. If there's nobody on base, I throw it to first. And the whole time I'm just thinking about get it to first baseman as fast as I can. Gather it up, get rid of it. That's it. So it's and even then I'm probably not thinking about that. I probably thought about that when I was training. But then when I got more proficient at it, I wasn't thinking about it at all.
No, it just becomes, you've done it so often, it just becomes instinctive.
Right. So I know with, a good example is Jack Nicklaus used to always say he would not only just think about a tree, he'd think about a leaf on a tree, right? So that way, if he hit the tree, or he hit the leaf, or missed the leaf, you want to get that?
I want to stop it.
It happens all the time. We're in real life here.
I didn't even think about that. I'd moved the phone in another room.
That's okay. So he, instead of him thinking about the tree, he would think about a leaf on the tree. So if he missed the leaf, he'd still hit the tree. I relate that to darts. I say, if you're throwing darts, if you're playing baseball and darts, or you're just throwing darts and you're going to hit the bullseye or one of the numbers. You're not going to go, boy, I hope I don't hit the wall next to the dartboard. You would never think that. It's amazing to me how completely different people approach the game of golf and as they approach any other athletic endeavor that has to do with the projectile.
Well, this is one of the things that when I was first introduced to Bob Rotella's books, I wish I had gotten hold of them when I was 16 years old, but where he was talking about picking a very well-defined target.
Yeah. Small,
well-defined target. And that reminded me of a member guest tournament one time. We had, in order to make it fun and help speed play up a little bit and all of that, we had just drawn a circle around the cups, and it was a 3-foot radius, which meant it was 6 feet in diameter.
Sure.
And basically anything inside the circle was automatically good. What I witnessed was, instead of putting at the cup, people started putting at the circle.
Yeah, and left it short of the circle.
And they would leave it short of the circle.
Yeah.
Which was 3 feet short of the hole. But, they changed their target. And, my attitude is, I practice putting, for instance, a lot to a golf tee.
Yep.
I want to putt to the smallest target I can find. And, I think those, it's a little expensive, but I think those smaller cups, a few of those on the putting green, is a good idea.
I agree.
Because once you get used to putting to that, the other cup starts to look huge.
Yep. That's true.
It's the same thing. People ask me, I always drove the ball well. Even though I was longer than most people, but it was two things. They'd ask me, said, how do you drive the ball as well as you do? I said, well, there's two things. Number one, I consider the tee shot the easiest shot in golf, because the ball's teed up and the lie's flat. It doesn't get any easier than that.
Right.
And number two, I don't pick a line of flight and try to hit the ball as far down that line of flight as I can. I try to visualize a specific place on the fairway. I want to see a certain spot on the fairway and hit the ball into that spot as if it were another green.
Sure. So it's kind of like when you're doing short game and you're picking a spot, a landing area, so that the ball will land there and then roll to the hole. So
Right.
It's very similar mindset.
But it reminded me of, I was playing with another professional that he and I hadn't played together before. It was the first time we'd played together. And it was just a social round of golf. But we were playing a golf course that neither of us had ever played before. And it was they had a lot of relatively short dogleg holes, which I don't really care for. It's a little hard for me the first time I play a course like that, because I have no idea where to land the ball. And so we finally get to this long open par 5. And I caught one pretty flush. We get out there and I'm well past him. He said, I didn't know you could hit the ball that far. I said, this is the first time I've been able to see where the ball is going to land. What? I could pick a target out there. I wasn't just, do I want to take, is the driver going to be too much? Do I just want to curve it around the trees over there, trying to figure, it was a blind spot. And
Sure.
The first time I play a golf course, I don't do well hitting in blind spots. I just like to be able to know where the ball is going to land, because that's my mental target. And it's the same thing on the golf course. I may aim it at, a cart sign or something like that, but it's going to be a very well defined, so that I've blocked out any thought of where I don't want it to go.
Right. I know that for me, I always find that if I play on a course that's tighter, if it has smaller landing areas, I play much better. If it's a tighter fairway, I play much better. And it's because it narrows my focus to a point. And now I'm just hitting it to a point. And I remember, this is going back, I was probably in my early 40s, and I was in Atlantic City playing at a course called Blue Heron Pines. And there was a lot of very tight landing areas on this particular course. and I was playing with another gentleman, and I was hitting it to the narrowest part of all the fairways. I was driving it really well. And he looked at me and he said, do you ever miss a fairway? He kind of got a little bit upset at me for that. And I don't know why, but he said, don't you ever miss a fairway? And I said, apparently not today. I said, I guess it's because they're so tight that it's getting me to focus more on a point. I said, when I play on a fairway that's wide open, and I don't have anything to really pick a point on, I'm hitting it all over the place. I said, maybe what you should do is try to focus on hitting it to that point as opposed to just, worrying about hitting the fairway at all. And when he did that, he all of a sudden started to drive it a little bit better, and then he wasn't quite, I think, as perturbed with me.
But yeah, I mean, I understand completely. This is why something registered on me one day that on certain holes where the driver obviously wasn't the club of choice, for years I always carried a 1-iron, and that was a go-to club for me off the tee.
Yeah.
But I finally realized one day that I tended to be more accurate with my driver off the tee than I did the 1-iron. And what occurred to me was with the driver, I narrowed my focus. I picked a well-defined target. With the 1-iron, I just kind of took the attitude, my gosh, anybody can hit the fairway with an iron.
Sure.
And I would get up there, and I'd end up missing the fairway because I never picked a target. I just assumed I could hit the fairway.
Right, because you thought that because it was an iron, it was going to be a tighter dispersion, and you weren't going to miss it.
And so I didn't pick a target. Now, once I started to pick a target with the iron, then I didn't miss any more fairways with it.
Sure.
But it's it's the mental side of the game is so much more important. Most golfers, if they knew how to think and how to manage their way around the golf course, could be better than they are with the swing they've got today. I mean, when I would play in, particularly if I would go somewhere to play in a pro member tournament, mm-hmm. and I'm playing with somebody else's members, I always wanted, my ideal partner was a guy with 18 strokes that could hit it far enough to potentially reach the green in regulation, because I could coach him around the golf course. I could just tell him what club to hit and where to hit it, and consequently, we always would do well, because my job was just to make sure we didn't make bogey.
Right.
With him, it's like, I remember one particular par 4, and he hit a pretty good tee shot. He hit it in the fairway, but it was a long second shot, and this is prior to the days of hybrids. He was going to have to hit a fairway wood, and the green was L-shaped, and there was a bunker in the L part, the elbow part of it,
sure,
and a bunker behind. So this part of the green was relatively narrow, and the pin, of course, was in that part of the green.
Right.
And he's standing there, and he's pulled out a fairway wood. And I asked him, I said, where are you going to hit that? He said, well, I'm going to hit it at the flag. I said, well, time out a second. Number one, if you happen to catch the ball good and hit it relatively straight, if you carry the front bunker, you can't stop the ball with that club before it goes in the back bunker. So what I want you to do is just aim it over there to the left side of the green. That if you hit the green, you got 2 putts. And so, that type of thing, he just instinctively was going to go for the flag. And I was playing with a college professor one day, and he had hit the ball in the rough off the tee, and I walked down there. I got there first and found the ball. And I'm looking at it, and it looked like it was probably sitting in an old divot mark that had grown back out, but it was a little bit of a depression. And the hole was a par 5. I looked at the shot, and I decided probably the best I could do from that lie was probably a 6-iron. So I go back to the cart, and I turn around, and he's down there, and he's got a 3-wood in his hand. And I looked at him, I said, "Doctor," I said, what are you getting ready to do? He said, "I'm going to hit a 3-wood. I said, "Why?" He said, "I'm 245 yards from the green." I said, "After you hit that 3-wood, you're going to be 242 yards from the green."
Yeah.
He had absolutely no chance. I said, just take an 8-iron and beat it down there.
Right.
And then you got a chance to hit the green in regulation. But, they just don't think their way around the golf course properly.
It's funny. I think that most people, they actually have expectations higher than their capability. And that goes in when they're learning. They expect themselves to get it faster, and they think that they should play better, but their ability level doesn't dictate that. It's kind of like they're elementary school kids, and they're trying to get a college diploma. And they think they should. They really do. Instead of saying, well, you know what? I'm going to try to be smart about this, and I'm going to do what a professional would do. A good example, you mentioned that, you wanted to hit a 3-wood onto the green. I had a guy, did a playing lesson with him, knocks a tee shot right into the right rough. I want to say about 40 yards ahead of him is a stand of pine trees. On the other side of the pine trees is the green. The hole was fairly straight, but he's on the right side. Pulls out, he's about 140 yards out. Pulls out a 7-iron and says, I said, "Okay, what do you got there?" He said, "7-iron. I said, "Well, what are you going to do with it?" And he said, "I'm going to hit it over those trees onto the green." And I said, "Okay, let me ask you a question. If I drop 10 balls here, right here, and I gave you that 7-iron, I didn't give you any other club, I gave you that 7-iron, and I said, all right, I want to see how many of these 10 balls you can hit over the green. How many do you think you could hit over, or hit over the trees? How many do you think you'd hit over?" He goes, "Oh, at least 8. I said, "Really?" I said, "You know what? I think you should be on the tour." I said, "Because I think a tour pro could only hit about maybe 5, max." And he goes, "No way. I'm going to go for it." What does he do? He goes for it. It didn't even get halfway up the trees. It went right into the trees. I said, "Okay, do me a favor. Drop another ball." He dropped another ball. I said, "Now, go get a wedge." Pulls a wedge out. I said, "You see that 100-yard marker there?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "It's only 40 yards away, right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Hit a little pitch shot up there onto that 100-yard marker. You can do that, right?" "Sure." Pitches it up there right near the 100-yard marker. I said, "Now, out of both of those balls, the one that's in the trees or the one that's there at the 100-yard marker, which would you rather hit?" He goes, "Well, the one on the fairway, of course." I said, "Well, then why did you try to hit it over the trees?" When I said, "Do you think that you could do that every time?" And he goes, "Well, I don't think that now." And I said, half of your game is not because you're not a great player. Half of your game is because you're not playing like a great player thinks.
Right. And it's one of the objectives that I try to get across to them is that you always want to play the shot that leaves you. It's like shooting pool. You want to leave yourself a good lead.
Set up for the next shot.
Yeah, you set up for the next shot.
I mean, it's great to sink the ball in the pocket, but if you don't have another ball, then you're just, what are you going to do now? It's not your turn anymore. You can't run the table.
But I got to know. I've gotten to know a couple of golf course architects over the years, and playing with them, particularly on a course they designed, is interesting because they can tell you what they had in mind when they laid the hole out.
Right.
Which opens your mind up a little bit to different ways to play the shots and that sort of thing. But anyway, we were playing one day, and he looked at me and he said, have you ever wondered why golf course architects put most of the trouble short of the green? Why they put it in front? And I said, no, not really. I said, I noticed that's what happens, but I never really thought about it. He started laughing. He said, when is the last time you heard a golfer say, do you think a 7-iron is too much?
Yep.
I said,
how many people do you see hit it over the green? Not many.
Yeah, right. That most. I was playing with a member one time, and it was the what used to be the Oldsmobile Scramble, and he was my D player. And I mean, he wasn't. His approach shots weren't even getting to the front bunker. And I asked him, I said, I said, basically, if you hit a little more club, you could get the ball on the green. He said, well, if I hit it right, I've got the right club. And I said, you're a 28 handicapper. You're not going to hit it right very often. I said, if you watch, excuse me, I said, if you watch me, like on a par 3, if I catch the ball dead flush, I'm always past the hole because I assume I'm going to miss it a little bit. Because it's very rare to catch the ball dead solid. At my level, it's very rare.
Yeah.
And realistically, what chance did he have as a 28 handicapper of catching it dead flush?
I agree. I mean, it's a lot of pros. A lot of people believe that that pros hit all these great shots during their round. And they get done their round and they go like, I might have hit 3 good shots there that I actually did what I wanted to do. The other shots weren't that great to me. I mean, they might have looked great to an amateur player, but to the pro, it wasn't what he wanted to do.
One of the things that made a huge impression on me is, make a long story short, I had the opportunity to spend some time with Ben Hogan.
Awesome.
And to have dinner with him. And I mean, he's really, after a couple of glasses of wine, he's really a charming individual. But I'm sitting there and I'm in awe. I'm trying to figure out what can I say to him that's not going to sound stupid.
Right, exactly.
So after a couple of scotches, Mr. Hogan, you're the greatest ball striker that I've ever seen. And he looked at me and he said, no. He said Snead hit more dead solid golf shots than anybody I've ever seen. And I said, well, what do you attribute your success to? And he paused for a second and he smiled. He said, I missed it better than the rest of them.
There you go.
And that really influenced the way I played golf from that point on.
Yep.
When I realized that Hogan rarely hit it exactly like he wanted to.
Yeah.
But he had gotten so good that you didn't know, he was the only person who knew he had missed it.
Yep. His misses were very tight dispersion.
Oh yeah.
And that's the key, and that's what I think that most players who want to play this game have to try to do, is get their dispersion close and not be upset if they miss their target, and because if it's relatively close to their target, then they can still make par, and that's what matters for the average player. That's what the average players want to do. They want to make par. Tour pros want to make birdies and eagles every single hole.
But this is one reason. I guess it's one reason one of the reasons I never liked to hit practice balls. I always liked to play. I mean, I'd much rather go play a quick 9 than hit balls on the range.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons for that is when I'm on the range, conditions are perfect.
Yep.
I get aggravated when I don't hit the shot well because there's no excuse for it. Conditions were perfect. On the golf course, I don't have that expectation.
Right.
Because I never have, except on the tee box, I rarely ever have perfect conditions. The ball's always slightly above my feet or below my feet,
and it has to be too for drainage purposes.
Yeah. So, when I'm on the golf course, if I catch a little bit thin, that's okay. It's still a makeable putt. I don't, and so consequently, I club myself assuming that I'm going to miss it slightly.
Right. Right. So that way it's the margin of error is less.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Sam, look, it was great having you with us. You gave our listeners some great insight into course management. The one thing about when we do these interviews is we never know which way they're going to go. I'm a fly by the seat of the pants type guy, interviewer. I like to know. I find that the conversation goes much better when it's not when I'm not just reading questions.
Scripted, right?
When it's scripted. It's more impromptu. It's wherever it goes, and what I always find is it always goes in great directions, and we always learn a lot. Our listeners always learn a lot. I always learn something new, and it's just kind of a good way to do it, I find, and it was a pleasure having you here.
It was a pleasure. It was my pleasure. You made it very comfortable. I've done a number of these, and one or two were a little awkward, but this one I felt very comfortable the whole time. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad, and and you made it easy too. You have some great insight into the game. I knew that before I even asked you to be on the show. Because I'm part of one of those social media groups that you moderate, and we always see kind of crazy things going on in these media groups, but I always see that you're extremely level-headed, and keep everything in line. So I knew that, and I know that you're extremely knowledgeable about the game too, because I pay attention. I may not make comments on a lot of these things, but I pay attention to them all.
Well, that's one thing we found out, that Judge Tinker,
Sure.
Anyway, Judge as the senior moderator, he has access to some information that I don't have access to.
Sure.
And that's one of the things he talks about, is how many people read the comments, how many views they get that don't actually say anything.
Yeah.
And I try to keep that in mind, because, when you're on social media groups like that, there's certain people are always going to chime in.
Yeah.
They're pretty much going to post some kind of quote on every topic.
Yep.
But you also have a lot of people that just are interested in seeing what's being said.
Yeah.
And so As I say, I try to keep that in mind, that even though they're not commenting on it, they are reading it. So
Absolutely. I know that I only comment when I believe that I can contribute to the conversation. If I'm going to just reiterate what another person said, then what I will do is I will like their comment.
Sure.
Because then that's saying to them, I agree with you. I would have said the same thing. There's no sense in me writing down the same thing. But if I think that I can contribute to the conversation, or if I might get there early from someone else, and I don't see a comment made that I would say, then I might post a comment. But otherwise, I usually just kind of gather in the information, and I think that that's what it's there for, because it's educating each other and learning from each other, and how each instructor has different takes on this, and what can we get from that take.
One of the things I've learned, one of the things I've found interesting by being involved in a forum like that, is how many people have trouble understanding that the difference between fact and opinion.
Yes.
That they will say something as if it is a fact.
Right.
And I just periodically remind them that, I appreciate the comment, but that is just your opinion.
Right. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat.
Opinions.
Yep. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat. So, and everybody has their opinion on how to skin a cat. Not that people go around skinning cats, but that's the saying.
Yeah.
And that's true. And some things, and two facts. There's a lot of facts that are absolute facts, and there's some that are they're still dicey facts. They're really not positive.
They may be absolute to you, but they aren't absolute to me.
That's right. That's right. So, and I think too that if everybody in those forums just respect each other's opinion.
Exactly.
That's the key. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to fight over it and start an argument or say you're stupid or what you're saying is ridiculous, or you're full of hooey, or whatever it may be. You just agree to disagree. That's all.
You have no idea how many people we have kicked out for that very thing.
Right. Well, I mean, that's not what it's there for.
Permanently barred from ever coming back in.
Sure. It's if you can't have a conversation with someone and then agree to disagree, you have to be combative. Then you have some issues on your own side there that, and maybe you just shouldn't be involved in this, because every time you're involved, there's an argument. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. So it's better that maybe you go start your own group and moderate that group, and then give your opinion, and then you can be combative with the members who are in your group, and they're going to know that you're combative, and maybe they want to be combative with you.
No, you're absolutely right. But when somebody does that, and they do that occasionally, they go out and they start their own groups.
Sure.
But what I found is the people who end up being in their group, their new startup group, are people that are like thinkers.
Yeah.
That agree.
Of course.
And so consequently, they end up with a forum over here to talk, and everybody there is going to agree with what they say. And it's a little bit like, well, I knew I was right. Everybody here agrees with me.
Right. Right. So it's good that there's, I mean, of course, there has to be different opinions.
Somebody disagree.
Yeah, I mean, and that's good. Agree to disagree, and then also sometimes, all right. So if I don't agree with you, and you want me to see your point of view, then how about you convince me? Convince me convince me. Turn me over to your side. And if you can do that without being combative, and there again, it comes to being, as we said earlier in the broadcast, being good communicators. And sometimes too, when which I think can be not a great thing. When we're talking face to face, like we are right now, there's a less chance of us being combative. When we're just typing text, it's really easy to be combative because you're just talking to somebody you don't even know as a person. You're just talking to them as just like to be, it's just like when people are in cars, they have road rage and they'll do something like flip somebody off. But if they were standing in line and something like that happened, they usually wouldn't do that. They would either ignore that person, or they would maybe say, hey, that wasn't very nice, or something like that. But they wouldn't be combative in real life. Most people aren't like that face to face.
No. But one of the things that I found is I will frequently post a question that I personally think I know the answer to before I post the question.
Of course.
But I post it as if
you don't know the answer.
I don't know the answer.
Give me the answer. Yeah.
And it is amazing. I frequently, somebody will make a point that I'd never considered.
Yeah.
And by doing that, I actually learn something. From time to time, I rethink my position on that.
Yeah. And to me, that's the object of these groups, is to kind of look at the other side of it. And maybe it puts a light bulb in your head and go like, wow, I never thought about it that way. Maybe I should think about it that way. And then all of a sudden you do, and you go like, hey, I'm gonna adapt that. I'm gonna start doing that. That's really a great way to look at this.
Well, I was watching. Are you familiar with the TED Talks?
Absolutely, yes.
I love those things.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
Number one, because they're 15 minutes long.
Yeah.
And it's short and to the point.
Right.
But I was watching one of those the other day, and this person was giving a lecture on being wrong. And one of the interesting questions in there was, do you know what it feels like to be wrong?
Oh, yeah, I definitely do.
Well,
I think we all do, but we don't want to admit it.
Her answer was, excuse me, her answer was, it feels like being right because you don't know you're wrong at the time.
Exactly.
And she used the analogy of the coyote chasing the roadrunner.
Sure.
And where they run off the cliff.
Yep.
And the coyote just keeps running until he looks down and realizes he's run out of cliff.
Yep.
She refers to that as the moment you realize you're wrong.
Yeah. And all of a sudden the rug falls out from under you.
Reality sets in.
Exactly. All right, so we're out of time, but before we go, anybody who wants to work with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you, Sam?
Actually, these days I teach online only.
Okay.
And there's an app that you can download that's free, and it is Pro Swing Tips.
ProSwingTips.com?
Yep. And you can just download the app in the iTunes store, and you go online, and there's a number of us. We've got several what I consider really good instructors. I mean, these are guys that I have the utmost respect for. And somebody can, they go there, they get the app, they download it, they open the app, and then there's the listing of all of the professionals. And one of the neat things about it is we all have ratings.
Sure.
The only person that can leave a rating is somebody that has actually completed a lesson package.
Right.
Whether, and it's, in some cases you just do one individual lesson.
Sure.
But there are packages of multiple lessons or monthly unlimited, that sort of thing.
Sure.
And it's very reasonably priced. And you can post 2 videos, a front and a down the line video.
Right.
And then, I'll get on Skype or FaceTime or whatever and discuss it with you and then give you my recommendations.
Right.
And then when it's all over, you get to leave a review. And so far, I've had, have 5 stars, but you never know.
Oh, sure, no, because everybody doesn't communicate and get along with every single person. Not every instructor, not every student is right for me or for you.
Exactly. And I don't care what anybody says, nobody can help everybody.
No, it's impossible. You can't please everyone.
You're always going to have a student that you don't have a personality mesh with, whatever. Right. But
sure.
For whatever reasons, I don't care if you are in the Golf Digest top 50 or whatever.
No, it has nothing to do with it.
Students you can't help.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with it. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that, but just because players are the top instructors in Golf Digest, or instructors are like the top 50, it doesn't make them the best instructor for you. It might be the guy around the corner from you who nobody even knows, and he could do a great job for you.
Well, there's an interesting thing there that sooner or later, Judge is going to do his book on the golf industry, and it's got some revealing information in there. I'm not privy to a lot of it, but one of the things that's going to be in there is Judge hired people in different locations around the country to be like mystery lesson takers, and he picked as many of the top so many instructors that are actually giving lessons to the public.
Yes.
All of them. But yeah, that, and then the students would fill out a detailed evaluation after they had done their lessons with each one of these instructors.
Right.
And so each one was evaluated. And I don't know the results. The only thing I do know is that some of the names on there would be very surprising as to who was rated the highest. They're people you've never heard of.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that that's the way that these top 50, or top in state, top 50 in the country, or whatever, is how they should be chosen. They should be voted in by readers and people who have actually taken the lessons from them, and not as much their peers. Because I think their peers vote them in because it's like a popularity contest. And it's also, they might have witnessed them give instruction and they think they're really good. So they go, I'm going to vote them into the top 50. Or they just know them and they've heard a lot about them, and these guys are great at promoting themselves.
Yeah, they may have never seen that person give a golf lesson.
That's right, but they'll still vote for them.
It's name recognition, so
exactly.
They're on there. And it is one of the things that surprises me with golf is that with the technology that we have today, we have the ability to quantify results.
Yes.
In other words, to evaluate a student when they first come to you,
yep,
as far as
where they are,
statistics, club head speed, square contact,
face to path,
yeah, all of it.
swing bottom, all those things.
And of course, one of the main things is dispersion.
Yes.
How much dispersion do they have when they first start?
Yep.
And then after 2, 3, 4 lessons, whatever, have the evaluation done again. Then you've got documented results,
Yes.
statistical analysis that,
It's tangible proof.
that I can prove that on average my students achieve X percentage of improvement after 4 lessons.
Right.
And I think that would be invaluable information
Absolutely.
rather than just saying, my students all get better.
Right.
Oh, really? And you know this how? Well, they say they do.
Right. Sure. This is tangible proof that they do. So it's kind of like when a doctor checks your cholesterol, and then he tells you to do something and change your diet, and 3 months later you come back and you're 20 points lower. Well, then it proves that what he asked you to do worked. It brought your cholesterol down. We need to continue it because it's not where you want it to be yet. You want it to drop 70 points. Just like your score, you're shooting 100. You want to shoot 80. You broke 100. You're at 95. We still have work to do, but we have tangible results that your handicap is dropping. We have tangible data to show that your shot dispersion is better, that your face-to-path relationship is better, that your smash factor is up, that you're hitting the ball further, things of that nature. So technology is awesome if it's used in the right way and it's not overloaded into the student. They don't need to know a ton of stuff. They just need to know what, just like us when we go to the doctor. He can tell us a bunch of numbers, and what the heck do we know what those numbers really mean? We don't know.
Yeah.
He knows, and he can talk to other doctors about it, and they know exactly what it is.
Sure.
Same as with us as instructors. We know what TrackMan or Foresight or Flight Scope or whatever launch monitor we're using. We know what those numbers mean. But if we just say that number to a student, they have no idea. We can just say, well, it wants to be in between here and here. And we can get it in between here and here for you.
It's here.
That's a good spot.
Our goal is to move it in this direction.
That's it.
And just, it's like, the same thing with the doctor. You don't need to know exactly what goes into those numbers. It's just, are we moving in the right direction?
That's all we need to know.
Yeah.
That's it. Are we doing the right things? Are we going to get better? And that's it. So, Sam, it was great having you. And I want to have you back again, too. I mean, because I think that you're the type of guy that I could talk to for hours and hours and hours. You have a tremendous amount of insight into the game, and I really appreciate you coming on and being with me.
Thank you for the compliment. Let me know anytime. I'm available most of the time.
Sounds great. Until we meet again.
All right.
Keep it in the short grass. All right. Take care.
See ya.
You've been listening to Breaking Par with your host, Bernard Sheridan. Follow us on Twitter @BreakingPar and on Facebook @Par Breakers Golf Academy. Until next week, try to keep it on the short grass.